Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Dating is one of the most talked about topics in my office, and for good reason. Romantic love plays such a big part of happiness for so many of us, and if life were a pie chart, the love component would take up a large slice. And dating can be tricky and bring up lots of vulnerability at any stage of life. But what happens when we are dating later in life? Perhaps an unexpected divorce or the tragedy of death caused us to date at a stage in life that contradicted our imagined trajectory. And if we have children, how do we tell them we are dating? These and so many other questions and ideas will be discussed with a woman who is dating later in life, who happens to also be an expert couples therapist. I discovered Carol Kramer, who works as a psychotherapist in New York City, thanks to a courageous article she wrote for the Psychotherapy Networker describing her own dating process after the death of her husband, Steve, who died suddenly 6 years ago. I was taken by her candor and courage and knew she could speak to many people who are having similar experiences. To hear it from a couples therapist like Carol illuminates the nuances and complexities of dating at this stage in life. So listen in as Carol and I candidly talk about dating later in life. Carol Kramer, a hearty welcome to Super Psyched.
I am super psyched to be here.
I'm just delighted. I love the fact that you kind of offer the listener a double benefit. You're not just a couple therapist. You're someone who is going through the rigors of dating later in life, perhaps not as planned. You had a lovely marriage to Steve for well over 3 decades. And I imagined you'd hope to walk into the sunset, and then life happened and actually death happened. And you didn't get that privilege. And so here you find yourself not wanting to be alone, going through the rigors of dating at an age that you probably did not imagine as a little girl. And you wrote so beautifully about that experience in the Psychotherapy Networker. And I knew I had to interview you because I work with people who are dating later in life, and they find it, to say flummoxing would be an understatement. So I'm delighted to have you on.
Well, it's really exciting to be here and to verbally talk about, as opposed to just in writing, what my experience has been out there in the past few years, which
Absolutely.
was not something I expected to be doing at 70 and change is when I started. Yeah.
So at 70 and change, what would you say are some of, or perhaps even north of 50, I'm guessing that there are certain similarities, but what would you say are some of the things that differentiate dating at this stage of life from perhaps dating in one's teens, 20s, or even 30s?
Well, you're looking for different things when you're in your teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, even, well, up to 40s. And people at that stage are looking for possibly starting a family, which someone over 50 is not looking to do, possibly building a life together in a different way with lots of openness and lots of possibilities. And I think that, especially from the response that I'm getting from people who've read my article, that they found that my going out there and dating was so brave and so courageous, and something that many women over 60, 65, 70 are reluctant to do because of fear of what happens as we get older, which is we have lots of possible deteriorations of ourselves and the people we meet. So a lot of women have written back to me that how brave it was and courageous it was for me to do that, because they're afraid of meeting someone who might be going into dementia shortly or needing this replacement or that replacement, vision loss. I mean, there's a lot of deterioration that starts to happen when you're in your 70s.
A lot of people may hold on to certain myths that really contradict the realities. I remember working at a geriatric hospital, and one of the most common medical issues was sexually transmitted infections, because actually people continue to want to have sex. And a lot of people look at people north of 60 thinking, oh my goodness, there's no more sex going on here. And I was wondering if you could share what some of the myths and realities are as it relates to being single north of 60 and going through the dating process. What are some myths? What are some realities that you can share?
One reality is you're not going to get pregnant. So that's one fear no longer have. However, because of STDs, there's still the reality of needing a condom, needing to use a condom because they're out there. And a lot of people have a lot of partners. And so there's that concern that's still there. But the myth that your sexual desire disappears is a myth. For myself, that's for sure. And for the many men, I would say I almost interview them. I do interview them. I'm interviewing people when I speak to them on the phone or I meet them on a video to find out what is their reality? What is it that they're looking for? What's important to them? So in terms of your question, Adam, I say, the myth is that just because we've turned over 60, that we've lost our joie de vivre, we've lost our desire to have that frisson that happens when you meet someone and there's that chemistry. For me, that has always been, and I hope will always be.
And you are something of a Francophile and use the word frisson. And I was wondering if you could explain what that means to the listener.
The shivers you get, the excitement you get, the chemical quivers that you get when someone just does it for you.
Absolutely. When you feel that connection and that doesn't go away. It's almost like we feel it all throughout life, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think without that, it's very hard to want to go through this process of getting to know someone, getting to spend time with someone. Because, what I'm finding is a lot of women in their 60s, 70s have made a kind of a peace with the fact that there's no longer going to be someone in their lives. They have accepted the fact either because they've gone on many dates and it just hasn't happened, or they just don't have the desire because they have wonderful friends. They have a profession that they're still engaged in, as I am, or they have interests that they've waited to do their whole life and finally had the opportunity. And meeting strangers is just not one of their interests. And if they had the interest at any time and it didn't work, they no longer want to put themselves out there.
That makes total sense. There can be a kind of almost a discouragement, a hopelessness that can accompany this process. And what would you offer somebody to maybe reconsider that if they are discouraged, if they are feeling hopeless? What would you say?
For me, I think it is a whole attitude about dating that goes with who I am. I like people. I like meeting people. I like talking to people. I like finding out about people. And I think that's why I became a therapist. So kind of went with who I am and what my interests are, so that I looked at dating as, ooh, I'm going to meet a new person. Ooh, I have a chance to put on this nice blouse that I bought. I like the interaction with another person, whether it's male or female. And that I looked at dating as an adventure. I looked at it as an opportunity to broaden what I know about the world in terms of people, their interests, their backgrounds, because we're all so different.
That's what I'm hearing in the ethers as you share your experience. What you would offer someone who's discouraged is try to embrace curiosity, try to embrace the delight of getting to know someone new. And as I hear that, I'm imagining some of the people listening might be introverts and might actually loathe the idea of meeting someone new because of the perception that they will be judged and criticized or whatever it might be that keeps them from really embracing the excitement of meeting someone new. I'm sure you've worked with people in this space who are dating later in life who might fall more into the introversion and perhaps less curious sphere, and yet so lonely and hungering for relationship. how would you perhaps advise them?
People love a good listener. So if someone's really an introvert, but they're able to really be curious and open and attentive, then they can really connect by listening to someone, and hopefully they will meet someone who will help to draw them out. I mean, I remember meeting a lot of men who all they wanted to do was talk about themselves. And so they were very happy if I didn't say anything.
Almost to use you as a platform for them to hear themselves talk.
Exactly. Let me tell you a little bit more about me. And I said to one man who was very interesting. He was an artist and an art professor in college in Manhattan. And we walked around the reservoir at Central Park, and it was a lovely afternoon. And I enjoyed hearing his perspective on different pieces of art and museums and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then we went for something to eat, and he continued. And after a period of time, I said, "Are you interested in knowing anything?"
And what did he say?
Yeah. So he would ask me something, and then I'd start to say something. And right away, he turned around, became self-referential, and it became about him again.
Wow.
And so I think somebody who's introverted, if two people are introverted, it's a problem. It's really deadening when two people find it difficult to have a conversation and find out anything, or just be present to the other person's energy. If they're not able to do that, then it could be very excruciating, which is why I always recommend, if possible, to meet somebody FaceTime or Zoom or some kind of WhatsApp, some kind of a video connection. Because like right now, we're on Zoom and I see your face. So you're looking curious.
Mm-hmm.
I would know that you were curious if your eyebrows weren't knitting, coming together. But I would hear nothing. I'd hear silence. And in a new relationship or a relationship that hasn't even begun, silence can be very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But when you see someone, there's a lot of nonverbal conversation.
Context. Yeah.
So I think that for me, I would say the majority of men that I actually went out with, I had first met by seeing them and having some sense of whether there's any kind of a chemistry, whether there's a flow in the conversation, whether there's any sense of humor, whether there's any interest in who I am and what I'm about, and absolutely what they had to say about who they are and what they're about.
And how do you check in with yourself and render a judgment in terms of, this is someone I'd like to meet in real life, not just via FaceTime, versus, wow, thanks, but no thanks. And I'm wondering how you kind of check in with yourself as well as render the message of rejection if it comes to that.
So I have like a little ticker inside of me.
maybe a big one.
My palpitator, even it's not just with people. If I like a piece of clothing or furniture or anything, I actually feel a sense of excitement that I like this. I want this. I want to have more of it. And so when I'm on the phone or in a video with someone, I have a sense, do I want more of this? Can I imagine kissing this person? And I even imagine kissing this person. If I can't imagine kissing this person, then that's not a match for me. And so what I say, and it's really hard to say this, but I've enjoyed talking to you, but based on some of the energy that I'm picking up between us, I don't think we're a match. And I really wish you the best. I hope that you find the match that you're looking for.
What kind of responses do you get when you render that?
Usually, okay, as quickly as possible. I don't think anybody's really given me pushback. I mean, one man asked me why I said that after I wrote to him, or I forgot how I communicated it. But he asked, and I said, well, if you really want to know, the whole time we were together, you didn't ask me anything about me. And, I, like the rest of us, love a good listener. And that's important to me. Communication is, to me, what it's about. And if you're not interested in knowing anything about me, then I have a job where I listen to people.
I want someone who's interested and interesting.
Exactly. I don't want to have to pay to go to a therapist to be listened to. I have lots of friends who listen to me, but with a possible love interest, there needs to be that, I want to use another French term, je ne sais quoi. I don't know.
I don't know what.
I don't know what. The chemistry of the flow, the humor, the laughter, the getting it. Is somebody getting what I'm meaning, even if I'm not being direct? Is somebody reading underneath my lines? And am I able to do the same with them? And it's the nonverbal as well as the verbal, again, which you can get on video and you can't get that on the phone. That is so important to me.
You know what's so interesting is two people can be awesome and be a really bad match. We all know that intellectually, but a really good metaphor I've used over time is what we want is something akin to John Lennon and Paul McCartney. They may have argued, but they were soulmates as it came to songwriting, and they made beautiful music together.
Yeah.
But if we put, say, Paul McCartney with, I don't know, let's go with Eddie Van Halen, a great guitarist, it just kind of wouldn't work. Both independently world-class musicians, maybe some of the best stuff in their lane, and yet it would not have been as good. I say that oftentimes when I'm meeting with a client to see if we are a match, because as you and I both know, the match, even in a clinical setting, matters. And in the dating setting, perhaps all the more. As you were describing, I was just imagining George and Jerry sitting at Monk's Cafe, and the banter is just back and forth, and it's just back and forth, and it's so good and natural and organic. That's what you're looking for in part. That's one of the segments.
Being comfortable, really feeling like I want to spend more time with this person. I'm enjoying this. I want more.
And you really check in with your body and your mind. And I'd like to talk about those two channels, because I remember prior to choosing the woman who I would want to marry, I really wanted to make sure that I also allowed my intellect to drive the decision. Previously, I was more of kind of a heart-based individual, and I would try to fit that proverbial square peg in a round hole and rationalize it, which I see a lot of my clients doing, leading with their heart. Oh my gosh, I met somebody amazing. This is definitely it. And I say, yeah, maybe go 4 seasons with this person and find out how they are in the rainy weather as well as the sunny weather. I'm wondering, when you think about your intellect and your heart, because you do have such a big ticker, as you said, you have such a big heart. How do you find ways to glean the best information from both sources?
Well, it's an interesting question, Adam, because I think we have to pay attention to both our head and our heart. And if my heart isn't ticking, then I don't really want to go further. So that's really the first indication about whether I want to have a second date with somebody. And then sometimes I might use my head to say, well, this person is interesting. They have an interesting background. They have had an interesting life. They're still having an interesting life. Can I learn? Can I grow? Do I have something to learn from this person? Can I continue to grow? Because growing has always been very important to me and hopefully always will be. And if this person is a depressive or has just a negativity, just turns me off, pessimist, what is their view of life and the future? And if their focus is on dying and on illness, that's not where I want to spend time. So I really look at what is taking up this person's time. How do they spend their life? Do they have friends? Do they have connections with people who love them, whom they love? Do they have hobbies and interests? Can they live without me and be happy? Even if they fall in love with me, can they live without me? I'm very aware of what doesn't work for me characteristically in people. And one of them is somebody who is too needy and wants my time all the time. So there's a balance between wanting to spend time with someone and also having other interests in other people and other ways you get passionate. Does this person have passion, not just sexually, sensually, but for something that really inspires them to continue to explore life? Are they on a journey to grow, explore, expand?
As I hear you say this, I get very excited. And I think about it, something I learned from a biologist, that the cells in our body are pretty binary. They have two directives: grow or die. That's it. And you're basically saying, I want to grow. I want to grow. I'm committed to growth for the rest of my life. And what I also hear you saying is that I really want to know, what are their values and is vitality amongst those? One of the things that I really gleaned from various sources, including Malcolm Gladwell, who said, if you really want to know what somebody values, take a look at their bookshelf. You'll know what they aspire to. You're laughing as I said.
I'm laughing because my partner, someone's going to be 9 months now, has over 3,000 books.
Oh my goodness.
His interest and curiosity and desire to know and learn goes way beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Everything excites him.
What's it like to be with someone like that?
Exciting. I never know what's going to come out of his mouth. And that's, for the most part,
as it's up and downs, generally.
For the most part, there's a creativity in his thinking. So it's not even, smart is good, learned is good, educated is good, but it's not that. It's having a kind of a quirkiness, not just cookie cutter kind of a response to things in life that I never know what he's going to say. So it's not boring. I'm not bored. I'm always curious. What is his response going to be to this? There's an excitement to that. There's an adventure to that. Yeah. So bookshelves are important, as are friends. One man that I wrote about, he was great. A lot of checks on the checklist. But what I didn't pay attention to that was really important was that he didn't have any current friends. He said this one died and that one died. I mean, I got so many people in my life that I can't imagine that when you get to be in your 70s that you don't have a few really special people around. And so that says something to me. What is that about? Or someone who never contacts his family or doesn't speak to one of his children and doesn't know why the child isn't speaking to him. I mean, I'm looking for somebody who has done self-exploration and has a self-awareness. I think self-awareness is so top of the things that I find important.
And how do you define self-awareness?
Someone who's able to take accountability for when they mess up. That's a big one. That when you're in a relationship, in Imago, which is what I practice with couples, Imago relationship therapy, we have this picture of there's connection and then there's sometimes a rupture and then there's a repair. And the repair is what's most important in that dance of rupture, repair, and connection. How quickly and skillfully do you repair ruptures in your disconnect in the relationship? And so if someone has self-awareness, then they can say, I want to take accountability for how I spoke to you last night. I used a tone that wasn't kind. And I'm sorry. Had I been more conscious, what I would have done is just said, I'm really tired. And this is not a good time for me to have this discussion with you. So somebody who can really look at themselves and be transparent and articulate about what they notice about themselves.
And to the earlier expression of the person who is so self-involved, kind of like that Bette Midler, like, well, enough about me. What do you think about me kind of person? They would not have that ability to zoom out, take a look at themselves and say, hey, I'm self-aware. I recognize that I had a role in this, I'm guessing. And that would be an important data point for you.
Exactly.
And I love the way you articulated it. I want to take responsibility for this. You didn't say, I reluctantly take responsibility for this. You said, I want to. And I think that's an important distinction because that's so relational in nature to say, I want to, almost as if you're implying, and what I'm hearing is because the relationship itself deserves this integrity.
Yes. Beautifully said. Absolutely. It's not about me. It's about the space between. It's about the sacred space between that we call the relationship. And if one person is polluting it in some way and they're not aware that they're polluting it, they're going to continue to pollute it. If they, however, are able to see it on their own, then their partner doesn't have to point the finger and say, look what you're doing, and become critical, blaming, and shaming, because the person is able to look at themselves I mean, one of the things that is so special about the relationship that I'm in now is that when I start to become reactive, as I can if I'm not happy with something that my partner's doing, and he points it out to me in a way that often has humor in it. Like he said to me the other day, he's like, how many times you want to hit me over the head with the same bat? I just apologized and I took responsibility. And I thought, ooh, wow, yes, stop it.
That's So you checked yourself before you wrecked yourself there.
Yeah. I mean, I started the bat was in my hand and I was holding it up, as he pointed out for the third time. And being able to use humor to help the person take accountability is really useful. Because if you can laugh at yourself, then you can not crawl into a shame hole. Because if you crawl into a shame hole, then it's hard to get out of it and to take accountability. So the ability to laugh at yourself goes hand in hand with being able to say, whoops, that was me.
And I'm so grateful to people who've researched shame, like Brené Brown, who describes that we will become very defensive around our shame and maybe contrite with our guilt. So if I feel guilty, that can be a really good signal of, oh, my bad, versus shame. I'm going to defend this. And this is the hill I die on.
Right. But even saying I'm sorry, unless you know what you're sorry for,
right?
And you can relate, refer to the word or deed. I'm sorry doesn't, for me, cut it. Takes more reflection for me to know that you really are seeing what it is. And then maybe it'll happen less frequently. I won't say it will never happen again.
Right.
Because we know that that's rare in life, that we don't keep repeating the same mistakes. But yeah, I wouldn't go out with someone who's never lived with someone. Mm-hmm. So that's another very important criteria, because they've learned how to see that there's an other in this relationship, that it's not just about me, that we need to make allowances for another human being. And it's challenging. It's really challenging to make room for another person's idiosyncrasies, especially at this age. So you were asking earlier, one of the big differences of being in your 60s, 70s is we've had so much life. We've had so much more life than when we were in our teens, 20s, and 30s. And so our habits are so much more ingrained. And so, which ones can I soften and which ones are immutable?
Knowing thyself is so important. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. I love the fact that you are an imago therapist, and this is a model I love so much. I've interviewed Harville Hendricks and Helen Hunt, who kind of are the people who created this model. And you and I both studied it quite a bit. And we haven't just studied it for our practical use in a clinical setting. We use it in our own lives. And I think that's fantastic that you do. I was wondering if you could briefly explain just kind of a high level view of what imago is and how you apply it in your own relationships.
So imago in Latin means image. And the idea behind it is that we are drawn to someone for conscious reasons, what they look like, what they sound like, how much money they make, where they live, their intelligence, all of that consciously. But really what's pulling us in is the image of what we needed as children from our primary caretakers and didn't get. So for instance, I needed space. I was very, very loved and very admired and appreciated and smothered. So I needed space. So my imago, so the person that I am going to be drawn to is going to be someone who has the characteristics of the caretaker who frustrated me the most, because that's something I needed to get understood and have met my need for space and some agency by my primary caretakers. And I still need it in an intimate relationship. So you come into an intimate relationship with unmet needs from childhood, and unconsciously you're drawn to someone who's going to replicate those same needs. So my first husband was very loving, very giving, very caretaking, and that was very attractive until it wasn't. And I realized I needed some space. So that, an example of that was we were having glass of wine and there was a bottle on the table and I had my glass. He had his glass. He had finished his glass and he came over to me and he took my glass and he started to drink it. And that's not a big deal. But when you come from a house where you share a bedroom with two brothers until you're 11 years old, one's 5 years old and one's 3 years younger, I needed space. I needed something that was mine.
Yes.
Or he would come into the bedroom without knocking on the door if I was having a private conversation and start to talk to me. So my imago was to be able to be in a relationship with someone who was like my smothering caretakers. And getting the love you want means how can I language to him who was a neglected child, who didn't have someone pay attention to him. So he had the opposite need. He needed more attention and I needed more space. And then we found each other. And so I needed to learn how to give him more attention when I needed space. And he needed to learn how to give me space when he needed attention. And so both of us are meeting to make a connection. And it's not about right and wrong. It's about how do you get the need met that you still have in an intimate relationship that was formed from your first intimate relationships with your primary caregivers. And so when I'm in a relationship with someone who I pick up that they're going to have this need of me that's going to contribute to my feeling suffocated, that I become their oxygen. I become their whole life. As flattering as that is, in my case, it triggers my desire to pull back and shut down because I need a balance of connection and space. So it's finding that balance. And if somebody doesn't have enough of a sense of their self to provide that space, then I know right away, this is not going to work for me because it's going to trigger my reactivity to wanting to get away and wanting to just distance.
Sure. And one of the beauties of this model that Harville and Helen have so beautifully crafted is that there is a pipeline through which communication transpires that allows one person to be the speaker and the other person to be the listener, increasing the likelihood, possibly even ensuring that each party is heard fully.
Yeah, it's taking turns. It's like something we learned in kindergarten. What was that book that was out years ago? What I never learned in kindergarten?
Yes, I remember that. I think Robert Fulghum or something like that.
Everything I should have learned in kindergarten.
Everything I know about life I learned in kindergarten or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, well, takes turns.
Taking turns is a big one. And the good and the bad thing about having been doing Imago now since 1994, my late husband and I went to a workshop with Harville and Helen, and now I'm on the faculty and I teach it and I believe in it and it makes sense. However, when I'm in a normal conversation with my current partner who has not been, as I say, imagoized, he has not been imagoized, I sometimes will just say to him, could you just let me know that you heard what I said and that it makes sense to you? And without going through the structure of mirror, validate, and empathize, because I find it's become such a part of my life that having a normal conversation becomes a little bit more of a strain because you're not always taking turns. You're stepping on each other all the time.
Totally. So I want to pivot for a moment and talk about something that I see not infrequently with people who are widowed. Could be a widow or a widower who is now commencing the dating process and needs to come out to their children about it. And children may have feelings about their mom or dad dating someone who's not their mom or dad. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Well, I think that really needs to slow down. If there are children at home, then it really, really changes the whole picture as to whether you bring somebody back to your house for a very long time until the child has met them casually over dinner or just briefly, because the fear is you're going to replace my father, replace my father or my mother. If it's a man dating a woman, you're going to take my inheritance. I mean, there's a lot of fears that come into bringing another person into your life when there are children involved, and comparisons. It's very painful in the beginning, most of the time, to have a new person come into the life of even your adult child because they have this image of their deceased father or mother that this person doesn't come close to.
And that's really more who I'm speaking about, the adult children who now live externally,
Yeah.
who have seen the parent really terrified about coming out to their child in this manner. And I guess I would wonder, how would you advise them if the children live separately? They're now adults and independent, and yet might have some feelings about their parent dating someone.
I would advise them to ask their child, are you ready to meet this person that I have been dating? Mm-hmm. I would absolutely ask them. I would never just impose that meeting on even an adult child. I would ask, are you ready to meet this person? And I would only do it when that person really means something to me. And I feel like there might be an ongoing relationship. I wouldn't do it casually.
And how about even more preliminary, when the parent is considering dating or beginning to initiate dating? What point do they even come out and say, hey, I've begun dating? Or would you recommend the latter after you've begun to date to say, hey, I began dating?
I would recommend the latter, because why stir up something if it's not going to have any meaning to you? Why put them into any kind of discomfort if this person is a 1 date, 2 date, 3 date person? It's not worth it. I was very surprised. I brought my partner to my stepson and daughter's Thanksgiving. He was so close to his father and so adored him that I was reluctant. I was reluctant. Is this going to be comfortable? Is he going to be friendly to my new partner? Is he going to be judging him? And all of that. I have 4 stepchildren. One of my stepdaughters was there with her family, and everybody was very lovely and kind because it's been a long time. I mean, my late husband, Steve, has been gone for over 6 years. So that's very different than when it was new. I would not have done that early on, even with stepchildren. And it's very different with stepchildren than with biological children.
So true.
Probably worse because they're more critical of me than if I was their mother, I think.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I love talking about is that we are therapists and we are human first. And I'm wondering how this very human experience of dating at this age in life has perhaps changed you as a couple and relationship therapist. How has it informed your point of view?
I'm much more humble. I'm much more humble about judgments I might internally have made when I see other couples dealing with certain issues. I can really understand the struggle. I'm laughing because I'm thinking of a big theme is one person is always complaining that their partner is on the phone or has the phone in their hand or is always looking at the phone, or the phone is always on the table. So there's certain things that I'm experiencing as a dating person that irk me, that I'm hearing, and I'm saying, oh, I get that. So I've had a lot of different experiences with the different dates that I've had that help me to really plug in more, be more empathic on a deeper level to some of the challenges of being with someone 24/7 or however many hours spent together.
Beautiful. And you very courageously, with profound vulnerability, wrote an article that I mentioned earlier in Psychotherapy Networker, came out to all of your colleagues about the process you're going through. And I'm wondering if you could share, what has that been like to share something so private and personal?
Well, it's been pretty astounding. I didn't quite expect the onslaught of letters that I've been getting from colleagues, friends, other therapists, because I'm in different listservs that have seen the article. People who are telling me their story of how they have either given it up, and reading my article makes them clear that they don't want to do it again. Or the opposite.
This is the death knell. I'm done.
Right. Or the opposite. Like, I tried it, and now hearing your story is making me think about whether I want to try it again. I guess my desire was, I started to write an article that was called I Should Have Known, because there were so many things that I projected onto my new dates that weren't apparent to me until I got to know them better. And then I thought, how did I miss that? How did I miss that? So what I wanted to do was, what's happening is to kind of excite people who have a little bit of a desire left in them to go out there and look for love. Because for me, I have lots and lots and lots of love in my life. Lots of love. lots of people to do things with, but the feeling of being loved and feeling loving to another human being there's nothing in my history that matches that. And I wanted to offer that invitation to other women who may have just given it up and said, what for? And it's a very personal choice. I mean, there's another article in the same Networker journal about it's okay to be single, and it is okay to be single. But for me, it wasn't. For me, I don't want to live with anybody again. I like having my privacy. I like having my space, but I like having the possibility of sharing my space and my thoughts and having a person who's interested in that besides my good friends who is got this masculine energy that is delightful. And I have always felt that way since I was 10 years old. I've always felt like I like the opposite sex. I love the same sex, but in terms of what it does for me, in terms of feeling fully alive, I wanted to interest other women in maybe becoming more fully alive than they've thought possible.
I love that. And how could a person perhaps check in with themselves to differentiate that actually I'm done, I want to tap out, I want to be single for good, versus actually there's still some gas in the tank. I actually want to go another round and see if I can find a person who will bring forth that vitality in a romantic relationship.
I think it's so individual. It's something that that you have a hunger for. It's like, why do I like certain food? Why am I hungry for this? It's like having a hunger for that sensual, sexual connection is something that you either have or it's dead or you've put a cap on it. And it's a decision. Do I want to take that cap off and allow for the who knows? And there is a lot of who knows. There is a lot of what could possibly happen that's wonderful and what could possibly happen that isn't so wonderful. And you have to be somewhat of an adventurer, of someone who loves to have different experiences without a definite knowledge of the ending. And none of us know the knowledge of our endings.
Absolutely. And yet I want to give a little pushback here because I think that fear could actually yield a false positive to a person saying, you know what, I'm a little scared, therefore I'm done. When they actually aren't done. Mm-hmm. It's actually, they're letting the fear rule the day.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm wondering, we don't have a test for this to help people figure out. But I'm thinking that as a couple therapist, I'm guessing that you've given some pushback to some people who thought they were done dating, and yet they were telling you in other ways that they weren't. And I'm wondering, how could a person perhaps engage in pushback with themselves or in the context of therapy if they are allowing fear or some other factor to cause a false positive that they're done and actually they're not done?
We would explore, what is it you're afraid of course. What is it you're afraid of? What would happen if that happened? It's really about, what are you missing by not having a person in your life? How are you substituting or replacing or filling your life with things that excite you? There are people who go in and out of trying it and then stopping and then trying it and stopping. And I think that there's a certain kind of a embarrassment, especially on online dating, that women in their 70s, am I too old to be doing this? Mm-hmm. Foolish. Can I say that I'm 70, 72, 73, 77? One woman just wrote to me, she's 80. Am I too old? And there's a man out there who's 80 or 85. Can you go beyond that story you're telling yourself that you're too old for what? Mm-hmm. What are you too old for? So I would explore with them what their fears are. And I would never tell anybody that they should do it, but I would really look at what it might open up for them.
And one of the things that I'm imagining people fear is getting naked for the very first time, because in our 20s, we have 20-year-old bodies, and in our 70s, we have 70-year-old bodies. I don't care who you are. Right. And I'm wondering, what about that?
Yeah, well, I did mention that in my article.
You did.
That it was a thought of mine. And I guess when the time was right with the first person I wrote about, I didn't have that self-consciousness. When I was ready to start to disrobe, I was excited about it. And I also knew he was no spring chicken either. My arms, which are sagging and didn't sag 10 years ago, his arms are sagging too. His face is sagging too. I think if you don't have a level of self-acceptance, I think it's really hard to go out there because you've already rejected yourself.
And so how would you encourage people who may have rejected themselves to reconsider themselves?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. Like what is wonderful about you? What is wonderful and what makes you have all the friends that you have? What is it about you? And to really help them look at and explore everything that is vibrant and alive and interesting and miraculous about who they are. You really have to like yourself. I think put yourself out there. I
remember reading the literature that older people enjoy the sensual act of sex perhaps more than younger people, that there is something even richer. And that was very encouraging to me when I read that back in graduate school in my sexology class.
Because you're not looking for the quick orgasm. It often doesn't happen. It often doesn't happen that man will have an erection. It's not about the end result. It's about the process. And I think that as we age, we get to really appreciate slowing down and enjoying the process of connecting physically and intimately with another human being's body. I mean, some of my most exciting times in my current relationship is being fully clothed and just hugging and feeling all the tension in my body drain out and just calm. He has called me his chicken soup or tranquilizer or his tranquilizer. And I have felt the same. There's a visceral connection that is more than sexual, more than sensual. It is deep, deep intimacy. It's cellular. And I personally think that just like infants need to be touched, older people need to be touched deeply and often.
Beautifully said. Before I go to my final question, is there anything I should have asked but haven't yet?
Deal breakers, I guess. Things that comes up, but if there's no attraction, and I think I've mentioned it, if they have a temperament that's negative, if they have very serious health issues, that might be a deal breaker. Yellow lights, besides red flags, I look at somebody love bombing, really saying too much too soon about how terrific I am. What's that about? Sending me presents and just things to be aware of. I think, we've had enough life to stand back and look at the big picture here. Yeah. And when you decide to get off dating apps is when you find something that's working for now, because being able to stay in the present, I think, is the hardest thing I know for me, and not to look at the what if this happens? What if that happens in terms of health issues for me right now and looking at my partner, to be able to just stay in, it's wonderful today and enjoy that. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Beautifully articulated. And I'm going to ask you my final and magical question. And that is this. Carol Kramer, if you were somehow given the magical powers to confer upon all humanity one trait, skill, or insight that would improve their lives, the individuals as well as the people around them, what would that skill or insight be? And how do you imagine it would improve the lives of the individuals as well as perhaps, as grandiose as this will sound, society at large?
I have several thoughts. One is having the ability to be empathically compassionate and open to the challenges that the other person faces as well. To be able to listen with compassion and empathy to another human being.
Love that answer. And it is probably, if this were a game of Family Feud on the podcast, that would be my number one answer that I hear.
Ding.
Each person says it a little bit differently. And I loved your version. I knew this was going to be fun. I knew this was going to be vital. I've had a blast speaking with you.
I enjoy speaking with you as well.
It's a total pleasure. This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psych. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.